The galaxy had been quiet for a very long time. Too quiet, some might say, but the Vorthok Empire liked it that way. Their black ships moved through space like shadows, visiting worlds only when someone needed to be reminded who was in charge. For 4,000 years they had ruled the outer territories with an iron fist. No one dared to challenge them. Commander Thexnell sat in his command chair, looking at the star maps that covered the walls of his ship. The bridge was dark and cold, just like everything else in the Vorthok Empire. He preferred it this way. Light was for the weak, and the Vorthok were anything but weak. "Sir," called out his second-in-command, Officer Vexmore, "we have received new orders from the High Command." Thexnell turned his head slowly. His people did not move quickly unless they were in battle. Speed showed fear, and fear was not allowed in the Empire. What do they want? There's a problem in the Terran system. The inhabitants of the third planet have been advancing too quickly. High Command wants us to deal with them.
The commander
Studied the data that appeared on his screen. The planet was small and blue, covered mostly in water. Its people called themselves humans, and they had been developing at an alarming rate. Just a few hundred years ago, they had been using simple machines. Now they had nuclear weapons, and were beginning to explore space. "How many ships do we have available?" Thexnell asked. 60 destroyers, sir. More than enough to handle a primitive world." Thexnell nodded. 60 ships was actually far more than they needed. Most worlds surrendered when they saw just one Vorthok destroyer. The Empire had learned long ago that overwhelming force was the best way to avoid long battles. Quick and brutal was their way. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. Their telescopes were primitive, and their technology was barely advanced enough to detect objects in their own solar system. They would not see the Vorthok fleet until it was too late. "What is their military strength?" the commander asked. "They have nuclear weapons, but their delivery systems are crude. They fight among themselves constantly," intelligence reports show. "They have over 200 different nations, and many of them are at war with each other." This made Thexnell smile, though his smile was not a pleasant thing to see. Species that fought among themselves were always easy to conquer. The Empire had used this weakness to destroy countless civilizations. When people could not work together, they could not defend themselves. "It will fall on ours," he said confidently. "Prepare the fleet for departure." The Vorthok Empire had a simple method for dealing with troublesome worlds. First, they would destroy all military installations from orbit. Then they would land troops to eliminate any remaining resistance. Finally, they would either enslave the survivors or wipe them out completely. Depending on how useful they might be, the humans would likely be wiped out. They were too aggressive and too unpredictable to make good slaves. Better to eliminate them before they could become a real threat as the fleet prepared to leave. Thexnell reviewed the intelligence reports about Earth. The humans had managed to split the atom. It even sent a few of their kind to their moon. Impressive for such a young species, but not impressive enough to save them. The reports showed that humans were violent by nature. They had fought thousands of wars throughout their history, often over the smallest disagreements. They killed each other for resources, for territory, for ideas, sometimes just for sport. Such a species could never be allowed to reach the stars. Vexmore reported, "The fleet is ready. All ships are armed and supplied for a quick campaign. Good. Signal the High Command that we are departing. Tell them we expect to complete the mission within one standard week." The 60 black ships moved away from their base like a dark cloud. They entered hyperspace and began their journey toward the small blue world that had dared to advance to. Quickly, the journey would take them 3 days, and then the humans would learn what happened to species that attracted the attention of the Vorthok Empire. In the cold darkness of space, the fleet traveled in perfect formation. Each ship was identical to the others, each crew trained to think and act the same way. This was the strength of the Empire: unity of purpose, unity of thought, unity of action. The humans, with their hundreds of nations and constant conflicts, would never understand this kind of unity. They would panic when they saw the fleet, and their leaders would waste precious time arguing about what to do. By the time they decided to fight, it would be far too late. Thexnell settled into his command. Chair for the long journey. Soon the galaxy would be quiet again, and one more potential threat would be eliminated. The Empire had done this so many times before that it had become routine. Another day, another world destroyed. But sometimes, the universe has a way of surprising even the most confident predators. Sometimes the prey has teeth that no one expects. And sometimes, the quiet that has lasted for thousands of years is about to be broken. By the fury of those who refuse to go quietly into the dark, the Vorthok fleet moved through space toward Earth, completely unaware that they were about to awaken something that had been sleeping for far too long. Captain Lee Gina stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, staring at the tactical display that showed 60 red dots moving toward Earth. The alien fleet had appeared at the edge of the solar system just 3 hours ago, and already the entire planet was in chaos. News reports were calling it everything from an invasion to the end of the world. But Gina was not panicking. She had been preparing for this moment for 20 years. Long until they reach us? She asked her tactical officer. 18 hours, Captain? They are moving at standard approach speed, probably expecting us to surrender. Gina smiled grimly. The aliens had made their first mistake. They had given humanity time to prepare, and humans were very good at preparing for war. The bridge of the Retribution was buzzing with activity. Officers moved between stations, checking weapons systems and communication links. This was not the chaotic panic that the aliens probably expected. This was the organized fury of a species that had spent its entire history learning how to fight. Captain, called out Communications Officer Park Min-ho, Admiral Kim is requesting a status report from all fleet commanders. Tell him we are ready. All weapon systems are online, and the crew is at battle stations. The truth was, humanity had been ready for this day for a very long time. Ever since the first alien probe had crashed in the Nevada desert 50 years ago, Earth's governments had been secretly preparing for war. They had studied every piece of alien technology they could find, reverse-engineered their weapons, and learned their tactics. The aliens thought they were attacking a primitive world. They had no idea that the humans had been watching them for decades, learning from their mistakes on other worlds. Sir, reported Lieutenant Song Hana from the sensor station, we are detecting massive energy signatures from the approaching fleet. Their weapons are definitely more advanced than ours. But not by much, Gina replied. They have never fought an enemy like us before. The captain walked to the main view screen, where she could see the blackness of space dotted with stars. Somewhere out there, 60 alien warships were approaching Earth, confident in their superiority. They had probably done this hundreds of times before, destroying world after world without ever facing real resistance. Today would be different. Captain Minho said, "We are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. Put it on screen." The view screen flickered and then showed the face of an alien commander. His skin was gray and leathery, his eyes were completely black, and his mouth was filled with sharp teeth. When he spoke, his voice was cold and mechanical. "I am Commander Thexnel of the Vorthok Empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world." Gina stepped forward, her hands behind her back. "This is Captain Lee Gina of the United Earth Space Force. Your surrender demand is rejected. You have entered our territory without permission, and we consider this an act of war." The alien commander looked confused. This was probably not the response he was used to getting. "You do not understand. We have 60 warships. You cannot possibly resist us." "We understand." "Perfectly," Gina said calmly. "You have made a mistake coming here. This is your only warning. Turn around and leave our system, or we will destroy you." The alien's black eyes narrowed. "Impossible. You are a primitive species. Your technology is inferior." "Then you should." "Have no problem proving it," Gina replied. "But remember, you were warned." The transmission ended, and the alien commander's face disappeared from the screen. Gina turned to her crew, who were all watching her with expressions of determination and pride. "All right, people," she said. "This is what we have been training for. Signal the fleet. All units to battle stations. Activate the defense platforms in the asteroid belt. Launch all fighter squadrons." The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Officers spoke quietly into their headsets, coordinating with other ships and ground-based commands. This was not the chaotic panic of a doomed world. This was the precise choreography of a species that had been preparing for war since the day they first looked up at the stars. Within minutes, the space around Earth began to come alive. Hidden weapon platforms throughout the asteroid belt powered up their systems. Stealth fighters launched from concealed bases on the Moon and Mars, and from shipyards that the aliens had never detected. More human warships began to emerge. The aliens had expected to find a defenseless world. Instead, they were about to encounter a hornet's nest. Captain reported the tactical officer. All defense systems are online. Fighter squadrons are in position. The fleet is ready for combat. Gina nodded. The moment had finally arrived. After decades of preparation, humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you threaten the wrong species. Open a channel. To all human forces, she ordered. Channel open, Captain. Gina looked directly into the camera, knowing that her words would be heard by every human warrior in the solar system. This is Captain Lee Gina. Today we make our stand. Today we show the universe that humanity will not bow to tyrants. Today we fight not just for our world, but for every world that has been destroyed by these monsters. Make them pay for every human life they think they can take. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was very, very angry. Commander Vexnall watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The primitive humans were supposed to surrender within minutes of seeing his fleet. Instead, they were fighting back with weapons that should not exist. Sir, his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, we have lost 12 ships in the first hour. The humans are using tactics we have never seen before. Vexnall could not believe what he was seeing. Human ships were moving in patterns that made no sense. They did not follow any known battle formations. Instead, they swarmed, like angry insects, attacking from all directions at once. How is this possible? He demanded. Our intelligence report said they were primitive, sir. Their technology is more advanced than we thought. They have weapons hidden throughout their solar system and their ships. They fight like they have nothing to lose. The commander stared at the battle display. A human cruiser, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, had just rammed itself into one of his destroyers. Both ships had exploded in a ball of fire, but the human ship had taken his much larger vessel with it. They are using their own ships as weapons, Vexnall said in disbelief. What kind of species does that? On the communication channels, he could hear the voices of human pilots. They were not screaming in terror like most species did when facing the Vorthok Empire. Instead, they were shouting with anger and determination. Dragon Squadron, this is Eagle Leader. I am hit and going down. Taking as many of these monsters with me as I can. Copy that, Eagle Leader. See you in hell. The human pilot drove his damaged fighter directly into the bridge of a Vorthok destroyer. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, and another of the Empire's ships was gone. Sir, the tactical officer continued, the humans are adapting to our weapons in real time. Every time we fire, they learn how to defend against it better. This was impossible. The Vorthok Empire had been using the same weapons and tactics for thousands of years. They worked on every species they had ever encountered, but the humans were different. They learned too quickly, adapted too fast. Launch all fighters, Vexnall ordered. Overwhelm them with numbers. But even this did not work as expected. The human fighters were smaller and faster than Vorthok ships. They moved like they were part of the darkness itself, striking without warning and disappearing before the Empire's weapons could lock onto them. A squadron of human fighters attacked his flagship directly. They moved in perfect coordination, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be. Their weapons tore through the Vorthok shields like they were made of paper. Impossible. Vexnall roared. Our shields are the strongest in the galaxy. Sir, they are using our own technology against us. Somehow, they have learned to copy our weapons and improve them. The commander watched in horror as more of his ships were destroyed. The humans were not just fighting back, they were winning. His mighty fleet, which had conquered hundreds of worlds, was being torn apart by a species that was supposed to be primitive. Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet. Put it on screen. Captain Lee Gina appeared on the view screen. Uniform was torn, and there was blood on her face, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. This is your last warning, she said coldly. Surrender now, and we might let some of you live. Dexnol laughed bitterly. You think you can defeat the Vorthok Empire? We have ruled the galaxy for 4,000 years.
Ow.
And now your time is over, Gina replied. You made a mistake coming here. We are not like the other species you have. Destroyed, we do not surrender. We do not give up. Fight until the last breath leaves our bodies. You cannot defeat us all, Dexnol shouted. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Empire will send more. Gina's smile was cold as ice. Then we will destroy them too. After that, we will hunt down every last one of your kind. We wanted to exterminate humanity. Now humanity is going to exterminate you. The transmission ended, and Dexnol stared at the blank screen. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, we have lost half the fleet. The humans are preparing for another attack. Outside the flagship, human ships were regrouping. They moved with deadly purpose, like predators preparing to strike. The commander could see more human reinforcements arriving from the outer planets. Ships he had never detected, weapons he had never imagined. They were ready for us, he said quietly. We knew we were coming, sir. What are your orders? Dexnol looked at his remaining ships. 30 destroyers against an enemy that seemed to have unlimited resources and absolutely no fear of death. The humans fought like demons, using tactics that defied all logic. Signal the fleet, he said finally. Prepare for retreat. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The humans had tasted victory, and they would not let their enemies escape. The galaxy's most feared empire was about to learn what it meant to face the fury of a species that refused to die quietly. The sleeping giant was not just awake now. It was hungry for revenge. The battle had been raging for 6 days, and Commander Dexnol's once mighty fleet was falling apart. What had started as 60 proud destroyers was now reduced to 23 damaged ships, scattered across the solar system like broken toys. Sir, his communications officer reported, we are receiving distress calls from all sectors. The humans are everywhere. Dexnol stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Human ships seemed to appear from nowhere, striking his forces and disappearing before his weapons could respond. They had bases he had never detected, reinforcements that kept coming from hidden locations throughout the system. How many ships do they have? He demanded. We don't know, sir. Every time we think we have counted them all, more appear. They seem to have an endless supply. Truth was even worse than Dexnol realized. The humans had been preparing for this war for decades. They had built secret shipyards inside asteroids, hidden weapon factories on the far side of their moon, and training bases on planets his scouts had never bothered to investigate. Sir, the flagship is being boarded. Dexnol spun around to see, his security chief running toward him. Behind the officer he could hear the sound of weapons fire and screaming. Impossible. How did they get through our shields? They used some kind of small ship, sir. They attached themselves to our hull and cut through the armor. Our soldiers are fighting them in the corridors, but the humans are. They are different from anything we have faced before. Captain Lee Gina led her boarding party through the dark corridors of the Vorthok flagship. Her marines moved like ghosts, their black armor blending perfectly with the shadows. They'd trained for this moment. For years, practicing in mock-ups of alien ships, learning how to fight in zero gravity in confined spaces. Squad 2, take the engine room, she whispered into her radio. Squad 3, head for the weapon control center. Squad 1, you are with me. We are going for the bridge. The Vorthok soldiers were twice the size of humans, but they had one fatal weakness. They had never fought an enemy that refused to surrender. For thousands of years, they had been used to enemies who gave up the moment they saw Vorthok weapons. But humans were different. They had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to fight bigger, stronger predators. They were smaller than the Vorthok, but they were faster, smarter, and completely unwilling to give up. Contact ahead, reported Sergeant Kim Day, her second in command. 6 enemy soldiers armed with energy weapons. Take them down, Gina ordered. Her Marines moved with deadly precision. They used the ship's own structure against the defenders, firing from behind corners and using the narrow corridors to prevent the larger aliens from using their numbers effectively. Within minutes, the Vorthok soldiers were dead and the humans were moving deeper into the ship. "Captain," came a voice over the radio. "This is Squad 2. We have taken the engine room. The ship is dead in space." Squad 3 reporting. "Weapon systems are offline. They cannot fire on our ships." Gina smiled grimly. "Good work, all squads. Converge on the bridge. It is time to meet their commander." Commander Thexnol watched his bridge doors being cut open by human weapons. His remaining officers had their guns drawn, but they were shaking with fear. None of them had ever seen their mighty flagship invaded by enemies they had thought were primitive. The doors burst open, and human soldiers poured through. They moved like deadly machines, their weapons finding targets with impossible accuracy. Within seconds, half of his bridge crew was dead. "Surrender," shouted a human voice. "Drop your weapons and you will not be harmed." Dexnol raised his hands slowly. Around him, his surviving officers did the same. They had no choice. These humans fought like demons, and resistance was clearly useless. Captain Gina stepped forward, removing her helmet. Her face was covered in sweat and dirt, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "I am Captain Lee Gina of the United Earth Space Force," she said. "You are now my prisoner. You have made a terrible mistake," Thexnol said quietly. "Vorthok Empire will not forget this defeat. More fleets will come, bigger fleets." Gina stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Let them come. We will be ready." "You thought you were attacking a defenseless world, but you were wrong. You woke up something that should have been left alone." "What are you talking about?" "Humanity," Gina said simply. "For thousands of years, we have been fighting each other, learning how to kill, how to survive, how to win against impossible odds. You gave us a common enemy, and now we are united for the first time in our history." Through the bridge windows, Dexnol could see the remnants of his fleet. Some ships were burning, others were drifting powerlessly through space. Human ships moved between them like sharks, finishing off the wounded. "This is not over," he said desperately. "Yes, it is," Gina replied. "Your empire has been living in peace for too long. You forgot what real war looks like. But we never forgot. We have been preparing for this day since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there." She turned to her radio. "All units, this is Captain Gina. The flagship has been taken. Begin accepting surrenders from all remaining enemy vessels." The tide had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy was about to learn a new truth: never wake a sleeping giant. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy was quiet again. But this was a different kind of silence than before. Now the fear that had kept worlds obedient to the Vorthok Empire was gone, placed by something new. Hope Captain Lee Gina stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching as human. Ships worked alongside vessels from dozens of other species. They were delivering food and medical supplies to worlds that had been enslaved by the Empire for centuries. The sight still amazed her. "Captain," said Lieutenant Park Min-ho, approaching. "With a datapad, we have received requests for protection from 15 more systems. They want human ships to help defend them against the remaining Vorthok forces." Gina nodded. After the destruction of the invasion fleet, the Vorthok Empire had collapsed faster than anyone had expected. Without their reputation for invincibility, they could not control their vast territories. World after world had risen in rebellion, and the Empire was now fighting for survival instead of conquest. "Send word to Admiral Kim," she said. "We will need more ships if we are going to protect all these systems." "Yes, Captain." "Also, the prisoner has requested to speak with you again." Gina sighed. Former Commander Thexnol had been asking to see her every day for the past month. A was not sure why she kept agreeing to meet with him, but something about the defeated alien commander interested her. She found him in his cell, staring out through the small window at the stars. He looked older than when she had first captured him, as if defeat had aged him decades in just 1 year. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "I have been thinking about what you said," Thexnol replied without turning around. about humanity being united for the first time. I am beginning to understand what that means. Oh, and what do you understand? He turned to face her, and she was surprised to see something like sadness in his black eyes. We created our own enemy. The Vorthok Empire spent thousands of years destroying worlds, enslaving species, spreading fear across the galaxy. We were creating order, but we were really creating something else. What was that? A reason for everyone to hate us? And when humanity showed that we could be defeated, all that hatred turned into action. We gave the galaxy a common enemy, and that enemy was us. Gina sat down across from him. Is that why you keep asking to see me? To discuss philosophy? No, Dexnull said quietly. I want to understand why you fight so hard for people you have never met. Your species could have stopped after defeating our fleet. You could have focused on defending your own world. Instead, you are helping strangers across the galaxy. Why? Gina was quiet for a long moment. It was a question she had asked herself many times. Because someone has to, she said finally. The universe is huge and cold and full of bullies who think being strong gives them the right to hurt others. But they are wrong. How are they wrong? It's because strength without compassion is just cruelty. It always creates its own enemies. You ruled through fear, but fear never lasts forever. Eventually, someone always stands up to the bully. Dexnull nodded slowly, and humanity was that someone. This time, yes. But if we had not been here, it would have been someone else eventually. The galaxy is full of good people who just needed someone to show them that the Empire could be beaten. Through the window, they could see a convoy of ships approaching. Some were human vessels, but most belonged to other species. Former slaves of the Empire now working together to rebuild their worlds. What will happen to my people? Dexnull asked. That depends on what they choose to do, Gina replied. The ones who surrender and help rebuild what they destroyed will be given a chance to start over. The ones who keep fighting will be defeated, and the Empire is finished. Not because we destroyed it, but because the idea of the Empire is dead. No one believes in it anymore. Your people will have to learn to live as equals instead of rulers. Dexnull was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke again. I have been receiving communications from other Vorthok commanders. They want to know how to fight you, how to defeat humanity. And what do you tell them? That they cannot? Not because your weapons are better, though they are. Not because your ships are faster, though they are. They cannot defeat you because you fight for something more than conquest. You fight for each other. Gina stood up to leave. Is that what you wanted to tell me? No, Dexnull said. I wanted to tell you that I was wrong. I spent my whole life believing that the strong should rule the weak, but I was wrong. The strong should protect the weak. That is what makes them truly strong. As Gina walked back to the bridge, she thought about the alien commander's words. The galaxy was still full of dangers, and there were still those who would try to rule through fear. But now they knew that someone would always stand up to them. Silence that had once been enforced by terror was now maintained by vigilance. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, human ships continued their endless patrol, making sure that silence was never broken by the cries of the oppressed again.